FOX6 Studios. This is Ask Contact 6. This is the segment where we bring in experts to answer your questions. Today, our topic is insurance denials. We chose this topic because a denial can be frustrating, emotional, time-consuming, and costly. We hear about them all the time at Contact 6. So to answer your questions today, on a wide range of questions, we have two experts joining us. First, we have Ryan Graff from MGW Law. Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Of course. And we also have Justin Wallace of Wallace Law here. Justin, thank you also for being here.
Thanks, Jenna.
I do want to say I asked you both to do this segment separately because you've shared your knowledge with Contact 6 before, and you've both work on cases involving insurance claims. I didn't know you two know each other pretty well. You've actually worked together before?
Correct.
Man, when I left law school in 2008, Ryan and I were best friends for quite a long time and remain very close friends to this day. We both do the same stuff and we're not competitors by any means. And we both think that insurance companies need to treat people a little better.
We also grew up together in an insurance defense firm and became partners at that firm before we left to sue many of the clients that we now sue, State Farm and others. So it's been an interesting ride, and I've known Justin a long time.
Well, I'm looking forward to our discussion today. Thank you again. We are going to get to our viewer questions in just a moment, but first, we did have a technical issue on the first day of submissions for this taping, so there may be some questions we did not receive. We apologize for that, but we will revisit this topic again in the future. And remember, you can always file a complaint form with Contact 6 about a problem you're having on fox6now.com, and we'll review your case to see if we can help. I'll also say Ryan and Justin are going to do their best to answer your questions today based on the information we have, but for more advice on a specific situation, you may want to seek guidance from your own attorney. All right, let's get going. Once again, reading our questions today is our Contact 6 associate producer, Annette. Annette, what is our first question?
Our first question comes from John. He lives in Hartford. John says, my wife suffered a severe stroke in February of 2023. She needed therapy, including speech therapy, twice daily while recovering in the hospital. She continued her speech therapy after being discharged from the rehab hospital. We were told that all therapy was approved by our health insurance company. In fact, my wife's speech pathologist kept track of the number of visits she was allowed to have in 2023. In April 2024, we got a letter from the health system informing us they'd done another review and decided the originally submitted information did not meet the criteria for speech therapy coverage. We are being charged retroactively for every session, which will cost thousands of dollars. Our speech pathologist stands by the necessity of speech therapy. My wife is permanently disabled and struggles to read and write at a basic level. She has trouble articulating her thoughts, operating a phone, remote control, the oven, and so on. She will likely never return to work. I've contacted the health system and our health insurance provider many times. They are pointing fingers at each other. Meanwhile, we have huge bills that could have been avoided if we'd known speech therapy would not be covered. John's question, how do I get my wife's speech therapy bills covered by insurance?
This is a hard one to hear about. I'm sorry for what John's family is going through. It must be challenging, and having medical bills on top of that is never easy. Justin, where do we start with this one?
So we start in a place that you wouldn't expect. The first question I would ask this individual is where their health insurance comes from. It makes a huge difference. If they come from their employer, there's a federal law called ERISA that makes it very, very difficult to overturn these sorts of denials. ERISA has a number of limitations, both on our ability to do discovery, like our ability to ask questions about what happened, our ability to get documents from the other side, and it also affects our remedy. So if it's an ERISA case, if this individual's policy came through an employer, the only remedy we would reasonably be able to get at the end of the day would be the amount of the claim paid. There is a reasonable attorney's fees provision, but it applies to both sides. And so even if you bring a claim in an ERISA case, you could get your attorney's fees, but so could they. So that's the first and most fundamental question is this a health insurance plan through an employer? Now, if it is through an employer too, I've had a case actually very similar to this where one of the positions we took was that this was pre-authorized. You guys agreed to this. Like you can't come back on your word. One of the struggles we had is trying to get evidence that it was actually pre-authorized. I hope
Verbally versus in writing, you mean?
verbally versus in writing. And one of the things you'll see too is the health insurance company might say, well, that was actually pre-authorized by somebody who wasn't necessarily us or didn't have the authority to do that. And if this was a normal, like a property insurance, your normal run-of-the-mill insurance, we could do a lot with health insurance claims. Insurers are terrible. They are well protected, most of them, by federal laws that prevent us from even figuring out fundamentally what happened here. The sir is saying that these two entities are kind of pointing back and forth for one another, and for decades, Ryan and I know how to deal with that. You get the documents from them, you sit them down at their depositions, you ask them questions, and you sort out who did what.
Does that happen a lot, this finger pointing back and forth?
All the time, all the time. And the finger pointing can be between the insurance company and their TPA. It can be with the insurance company and actually the employer themselves. Sometimes even with other third-party consultants who are involved, and they are very difficult to formally resolve because you don't have a discovery process in these ERISA cases.
Is this something John could work on without a lawyer? Are there steps he could take before it gets to that point?
So indeed, there's probably some mandatory appeal language in his health insurance plan that says that even before you can file suit, you have to go through 6 levels of appeal with increasing levels of difficulty and frustration and obstacles. He should probably try down that path. But one of the things you just need to keep in mind when you're dealing with a health insurance denial on an employer-sponsored plan is that your rights are very limited.
This idea of them retroactively going back, that seems like that shouldn't be allowed, right?
So, doesn't it? The most common thing that I see in that realm these days, and I handle a fair number of health insurance cases, is if a health insurance company is paying claims for somebody and they're starting to get more and more claims and they're not excited about paying more money for this person, they'll go and they'll look for other insurance policies that person might have from years and years ago through an ex-wife and a divorce maybe that has been maintained. And if they find such a policy, they'll say, well, that policy's primary, we're secondary. And on that basis, I've seen health insurance companies claw back hundreds of thousands of dollars of payment directly from medical providers, saying that, well, yes, we have insurance for this person, but we're only secondary to their other insurance, which we don't even know anything about.
Got it. Well, John, we wish you and your family the best, and thank you for that question. I hope this was helpful to you. What do we have next?
Next, we have Jeff's question. He lives in Waukesha. Jeff says, I submitted a hail claim to State Farm in June of 2024. It has been a disaster to deal with ever since. I've made countless phone calls to State Farm to get this settled, and so far I've seen a whopping $300 check. State Farm has claimed there is indeed hail damage, but is not willing to cover the additions that it will take to get the job done. My contractor has submitted a statement saying it will take more than $27,000 to fix the damage. Jeff's question, what can I do about a lowball insurance payment for hail damage?
So I know Ryan has expertise in this area because we've talked about this topic before. What can this person do?
Well, let me explain likely what he's going through, even with the short description, because as I told you off the air, I was recently informed by State Farm's primary counsel in the state that in 5 years I've sued them 147 times. Now, why have I sued them 147 times? One is market share. They're very large. The other reason is the reason you and I originally spoke, and that is on a fundamental level, State Farm adjusts these they adjust these hail claims all the same way. So here's what they do. You make a hail claim, they send out an adjuster or a third-party adjuster to inspect the roof, and that adjuster, a third-party inspector, likely says you don't have damage to your shingles. They may say you have damage to the soft metals, which I assume is the $300. They pay for that because that's a lot cheaper than the asphalt shingles. They may then, if you call them out on it, hire an engineer. The same engineer they've hired hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of times, and that engineer is going to go out there and say, yes, we have damage to the soft metals, we don't have damage to the asphalt shingles. That's the other thing State Farm does is they will move, it's probably been a disaster because they move your claim around from adjuster to adjuster. Justin and I did State Farm's work at an insurance defense firm for 10 years. And they moved adjusters on us. And what it's meant to do, it's meant to frustrate you. It's meant for people like him to give up. Don't give up. Continue. And here's how they justify all this. And this gets back to the original story, Jenna, that you and I talked about. State Farm takes a different position when adjusting the claim that is inconsistent with their policy language and inconsistent with the law.
And this is what you've argued in court a number of times.
And I'm sure Justin's argued it too, and we're victorious on this because the law is pretty clear. The law states that accidental direct physical loss is a change in the characteristics of an item caused by a covered peril. I give the car example all the time because it's the easiest. If you have hail damage to your car, it still gets from A to B. Your engine still works. You can still use your radio. State Farm would say that's not functional damage because your car still functions. But there is a change in the characteristics of the exterior of your car. Asphalt shingles are no different. So State Farm, what they have done through the help of an engineering firm that they paid a boatload of money to produce training materials for them, is they say, well, if there's no bruising or fracturing of the shingle, then there is no damage covered by the policy. That's not what the policy says. If hailstones impact the granulars and shed them, that is a physical change caused by a peril that's covered. You will not find in the State Farm policy bruising, fracturing, or anything like that. And if we're getting real deep in the weeds here, and I love talking about State Farm, what they're doing again is adjusting the claim inconsistent. They sell you the policy and they charge you a certain amount, and then when you dare make a claim, they move the goalposts on you. And so what I would say to this individual is State Farm will not change their mind. They will not send anybody else to inspect. And if they do send somebody else to inspect, it's going to be another engineer they've hired thousands of times before. What I would recommend to him is find a lawyer you trust, maybe on this panel, maybe not, and sue State Farm. Because what I will tell you, and I think what Justin could tell you, is their lawyers who defend these cases know they're going to lose. They know they have an uphill battle. Because once you tell a jury that you are adjusting claims inconsistent with the policy language and inconsistent with the law, you will not win that case.
Right. And these cases can be long and drawn out, but ultimately vast majority are settled, right?
A vast majority are settled. Of the 147 times I have sued State Farm, a handful of times I've maybe gone to trial, and I don't think I've gone to trial at all, frankly, against them, because again, they know that what they're doing is wrong, but they're saving so much money. Because for the 147 people that I've represented, there's probably 100,000 people who said, you know what, this is too much, this is too frustrating, my roof's not leaking, I'm just gonna walk away. Don't walk away. You have rights, assert them. But what I would, my last point is most people don't understand that you typically only have 1 year from the date of loss, whether it's a fire, whether it's a hailstorm, to file a lawsuit. That's a statute of limitations that the legislature gave the insurance companies. Sometimes it's 2 years, but typically it's 1 year. And what I will tell you as somebody who used to do general practice and didn't specialize, there's not a 1 year statute of limitations for anything other than insurance claims. So most people assume I can wait a couple years because I've got 3 years or 6 years. You've got 1 year. And so you need to file that lawsuit before the year anniversary of the event, or you may lose your rights.
That's good to know. Jeff, if you want to see any of our previous reporting on this topic, you can go to our website, fox6now.com, and you can also see what State Farm has said in response to the complaints we've received that were very similar to this one. What do we have, Annette?
The next one is from Diane in West Allis. Diane says, my hospital system is refusing to resubmit an insurance claim for a gynecological appointment that costs $375. My doctor's office made a mistake by saying the service was preventative instead of medical. The office corrected the error, but its billing department continues to say they won't resubmit the bill. I know the bill will be paid by Medicare, as I'm a high-risk patient due to past PAPs and colonoscopy indicating abnormal cells. Due to these factors, Medicare says I can have yearly PAPs and gynecological appointments. I have documentation supporting this. My hospital system's billing department thinks I should have appointments every 2 years. Not checking on these abnormal cells could allow them to grow unnoticed. I really do not want a cancer diagnosis. Diane's question: how can I get a hospital system to resubmit a bill after its mistake?
Justin, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one because I know you handle health insurance claims. I understand where Diane is coming from in wanting this type of screening done. What would you advise she do?
These, and I think this piggybacks off Ryan's last point, which is these systems are designed to get you to stop trying to get paid. They're designed to get you to walk away. And I just can't echo Ryan enough. Don't walk away. If you have a valid insurance claim, you are not a criminal. You're not somebody who's trying to get something for free. You're not some sort of vagrant or something. You bought something and you deserve it. And don't think, oh, the insurance company told me that I don't have a claim here. They're probably right. I mean, they know more about insurance than I do. This is how insurance companies earn billions and billions of dollars, by denying claims to meet people who deserve to have them paid, by giving them the sense that there's just no hope here. And this health insurance situation, not even really a health insurance situation, sounds immensely frustrating, right? It sounds like this was care that should have been covered and should be covered by Medicaid or Medicare, but there was an issue with the billing. And I think that, if that person came to my office, what I'd tell her is I will send you a letter to that medical billing office, and what I will tell them is it seems like you have miscoded this thing as covered by one thing instead of the other, and as a result of that miscoding, it seems like my client is having some adverse effects here because of that. Can you at least explain, do you disagree that this was a coding error? Or, what's next steps? Because we don't want to, if this isn't paid through Medicare, like, we're going to have to come back to you guys and look for it and give that sort of kind of intro, I guess. And hope sometimes medical billing departments will work with you on that stuff. The problem is there just aren't a lot of like forceful ways to go about, like suing the billing department saying they should have done this or that.
For $375, probably not going to go that route.
Well, probably not. But keep in mind that they know that too. One thing that I was really surprised about when I started doing the plaintiff side work here is that it is much easier sometimes to get a $500,000 claim paid than it is a $20,000 claim. And that's counterintuitive, but insurance companies think people will walk away from a $20,000 claim, and they know people won't walk away from a $500,000 claim. And so sometimes that's you'd think that, it's $375. Why don't they just pay it? To them, it's just the opposite. It's $375. Like, nobody's ever going to come after us for that. So I would try to work with that billing department and try to see if you can gently encourage them to see that, if their negligence caused your medical bill to become your responsibility and somebody else's, like, there's a legal theory that would allow recovery there. Trying to convince them that there's any real liability over something of this side, though, that's what you deal with. And my letter might get thrown in the garbage because they say, what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, it's going to sue us, and we're going to pay $375 in a year.
You did hit the nail on the head, actually, with this situation, because Annette followed up with Diane after we got this question, and Diane told her doctor, she told us her doctor resubmitted with a different code, and the issue was resolved. So she still wanted us to ask this question in hopes that other people would benefit from it, but that's something we've learned through Contact 6 too. If you reach out to the doctor's office, say, can we code this a different way? That can also work.
And let me give, I guess, a general point. It sounds like the fundamental challenge was a question of something like medical necessity, as in, was it necessary for her to go through these procedures on an annual basis or biannually or whatever? I really struggle with health insurance medical necessity denials simply because doctors and hospitals in Wisconsin are not providing people with unnecessary medical care. If you walk around a hospital, you're not going to see healthy people just hanging out. People are in hospitals because they have to be. People undergo surgeries because their doctor tells them to. And so when your health insurance company comes back and says, we don't think that medical care was medically necessary, the way that I reframe that is, well, providing unnecessary medical care to a patient in Wisconsin is actually medical malpractice. So what you're doing is you're fundamentally accusing this doctor and this hospital of unnecessarily, battering this, providing treatment that this person didn't need. And that's a big deal. Doctors are not supposed to be treating things that people don't medically need. So I struggle with those fundamental denials, but everybody out there, if you're seeing health insurance denials based on medical necessity, those things, they are fightable oftentimes.
Very good to know. Thank you for that question. Annette, what is our next one?
So our next one comes from our case files. Contact 6 heard from a Germantown man who'd learned his pet insurance was not being renewed. The insurance company was canceling coverage for about 100,000 pets across the country, blaming the rising costs of veterinary care. The man said this left many dog and cat owners scrambling to find alternatives. He worried his pet would be denied coverage based on its pre-existing conditions or its older age. He said pet insurance is not subject to the same regulations as health insurance for humans. The question: how is pet insurance different than health insurance for people?
I know people are willing to spend quite a bit of money taking care of their pets, and pet insurance can be a way to avoid that. Justin, what are your thoughts here?
As one of the few lawyers in the history of the universe to have actually sued a pet insurance company for a denied claim, I'm proud to say that. So fundamentally, though, one of the canceling coverage on this is I think is going to surprise everyone. I actually have more respect for insurance companies that say it's not a good decision for us to insure this swath of animals because it doesn't make sense from an underwriting perspective or something like that, as opposed to what we see more often is we'll take your premiums and then we'll tell you after that we don't think we should cover this for X, Y, or Z reason. So I actually don't have a fundamental problem with what that pet insurance is doing. Like they're saying that this isn't a good business opportunity for us, and at least they're doing it before you pay them. You know, what I think we see a lot of is, you pay premiums and then 6 months later the insurance company's like, geez, 2024 did not go well. Like we need to try to keep this money in our coffers until so the people can't see it until 2026 or whatever, that we have all these losses. And so we're just going to deny claims for random nonsensical reasons to try to keep our money, instead of saying we're just not going to take your premiums in the first instance.
In terms of coverage, is pet insurance different than health insurance?
So health insurance is far more regulated. That ERISA law that I talked about is often applies, not because they're health insurance companies, but because it comes through employers. But pet insurance contracts are just like any other insurance contract. They're subject to breach of contract and bad faith claims, and there's less law on them, which is actually good for people like Ryan and I, because the laws as they've come out generally are insurance company favorable. No, there's no reason why you can't sue your pet insurance company. However, I don't think you can sue them for not being willing to renew a policy, as that's more of a business decision. And frankly, thank them for not just taking your money and then denying your claim when it comes in.
All right. What do we have as our next question, Annette?
Our next one also comes from our case files. Contact 6 often hears from consumers seeking refunds for flights, cruises, tours, and hotel rooms for canceled vacations. These trips are usually called off for medical reasons. In most cases, these consumers did not buy travel insurance. Contact 6 has been able to help people get refunds or credit for canceled trips, but not in every case. The question: when is it worth buying travel insurance, and when is it not worth buying?
I think that's pretty straightforward, and I've wondered this from time to time. If you have like a big vacation coming up, not just flights somewhere for a wedding, where do you draw that line? When do you get the travel insurance?
So for a while, I actually tried to sue travel insurance companies on a nationwide basis. And the real problem with that, though, is generally the size of the claims. Travel insurance is good for big things. Like if it exceeds $10,000 or $20,000, probably. It is not worth buying for your general, in my opinion, for your general flights back and forth. Because I'll give you an example. My elderly father had flown in to see me right around the time the Ryder Cup was at Whistling Straits in 2021, I believe. And I bought travel insurance for him because he has all sorts of health problems. And he, while he was with me in Manitowoc, he got a bowel obstruction. And we ended up having to bring him to the hospital. And he had to stay in the hospital for about 3 days and missed his flight. And we had to reschedule it. And it was about $600. And I bought travel insurance. So I submitted it. And they asked me for 3 signed documents from a doctor saying that he was unable to travel on this trip, 2 signed statements from a nurse saying that he was unable to make this travel. And they were going to make me do approximately $600 of work to get these travel insurance benefits. And so the statement that I made earlier about how, surprisingly $500,000 claims get covered more than $20,000 ones, it kind of applies to travel insurance a little bit too. If your claim is small enough, they will just deny your claim and say, come get us.
Assuming that you'll just say, oh well, and shrug and give up.
And that's the thing that Ryan and I battle against is people assuming that we're just going to give up, there's nothing we can do, that sort of thing. Yeah, and the travel insurance companies put that out there. They make it hard for you to actually file the claims. They make it the whole process difficult, and alongside the claims that are generally of low dollar value, it just ends up being more a pain in your butt than anything else.
All right.
And the difficulty, unfortunately, doesn't stop once you file a lawsuit. It continues with discovery fights, and I have a case right now where there's 4 lawyers on the other side, and I show up myself. I don't bring anybody with me. It's an intimidation game. So, again, I'm going to get back to don't give up. That's what they're banking on, because they have the money and you want it.
And maybe think about it this way. If they assume that if they deny 10 claims, if 8 out of 10 people walk away and they pay double to the other 2 out of 10, they're still out ahead by more than 50%, right? So just be one of the 2.
And when
If
you
wanna
say
be-
don't give up, do you mean email them constantly, eventually get a lawyer? People want to take a lot of steps, I assume, before they take on a lawyer. Should you just be incessant?
You should, and you need to document, because the insurance companies, these claims adjusters, have claims files, and they put notes in the claims file. Well, there are 2 sides to a story, and they put their story, and they're trying to preserve their job, and they're trying to get their bonus. So don't ever talk to your insurance company over the phone, because they may be recording it, but you probably won't get that recording. So what I would suggest to people is be diligent, be vigilant, and document everything, because it makes it a lot easier when you have to go into a court of law and you and the adjuster are talking about the same thing and you have different interpretations of what was said and what was done, and you have your documents, because they're going to have theirs. They're going to have their claims system and their claims file, which they fight like crazy to keep Justin and I from getting things like that, because they know it's not necessarily helpful. But again, that's their side of the story. Make sure to document your side of the story.
All right. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
And even if you're going to talk to them on the phone, record it. Like when we walk into court and we say, Judge, look, they promised us X, and the judge says, well, okay, but life's complicated, a lot of stuff happens. It's another thing if we can say, hit play, and the insurance company says, I will give you X, and then the judge is like, wow, okay, well, I guess those demonstrative, those things that really show that they're jerking you around are what helps us win the day later. And the more vivid they are, your testimony that they promised you something is not equal to a recording of them saying it.
All right, let's go to our next question from Annette, who has had success overcoming some travel insurance issues in the past. Giving you some flowers there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. What do we have next?
The next one comes from William in Brookfield. William has a question about a bad faith insurance claim. His submission is brief and included the following question. Can a bad faith insurance claim involve pain and suffering and/or punitive damage?
Ryan, can we start with what bad faith insurance claims are?
Sure. Bad faith is separate from, let's start with the basics. The breach of contract claim that we make in these cases is you didn't pay me what you were supposed to pay me. So let's go back to the Hale example. You didn't pay me the $27,000, you paid me the $300,000. All you're going to get in breach of contract is the difference between that $27,000 that you should have been paid and the $300 that you were paid. There's a second claim we make under an interest statute, and I'm not going to bore your audience with the details, but it imposes 7.5% interest on those unpaid claims, which is a nice little kicker, and it's the insurance company having to pay you for holding on to your money. No different if a bank holds on to your money or the federal government holds on to your money, you have to pay interest. Bad faith is a different beast. Bad faith is, and I always explain it to my clients the same way, insurance companies can mess up, they can screw up, they can make mistakes. That's not bad faith. Bad faith is you had a lack of a reasonable basis. Another way to say that, you had no reasonable basis. So getting back to the State Farm Hale example, you have no reasonable basis to adjust the claims the way you do because your policy doesn't say that, and the law forbids that. And if you can prove bad faith, and bad faith, again, I don't want to bore people with the details, but there's 3 standards in the law, evidence standards. It's the middle burden of proof. It's not the criminal burden of proof. It's not the regular civil burden of proof. So I got to, by the middle burden of proof, clear and convincing evidence, convince a jury that bad faith occurred. If that happens, you can get actual attorney's fees, so the money you had to spend on an attorney, actual costs. You can also get punitive damages. And what punitive damages are, for those who don't understand, is those are damages meant to punish. They are meant to say to primarily large corporations, we are going to punish you with a monetary penalty so you don't do this again. And so before the legislature changed the law, punitive damages could be anything. You could have a $10,000 claim and get $1 million in punitive damages. The understanding of the thinking being, if you're a multi-billion-dollar insurance company like State Farm and you get a $10,000 punitive damages award, that's probably what they spend on water in a week in their corporate headquarters. What the legislature did, I can't remember the year, is to cap punitive damages in Wisconsin for insurance claims and all claims. And so all you can get is 2 times compensatory damages. So in these cases, your compensatory damages are going to be the cost to repair your problem, whatever that is, the attorney's fees, the costs, and you can multiply that by 2. And that's going to be the limit of your punitive damages. And the short answer, or the long answer, I guess, to the question is, yes, you can get punitive damages if you prove bad faith.
Does pain and suffering count toward punitive damages?
Pain and suffering is different. And I've, what I will say is one of the reasons I do this, and I think one of the reasons Justin does this, is because people are getting hurt out here. People are getting hurt. They're getting put in distress. They're getting put in financial distress. I've had a number of clients that have had panic attacks because their claim was denied. I've had clients that have considered terrible things, hurting themselves. And so, yes, you can get pain and suffering. But similar to other areas of the law, the court system and the legislature has made it somewhat difficult. You need to have really rock solid proof. You need to have a doctor to say, look, this person didn't have anxiety before, they didn't have depression before, now they do, and create that causal link to the insurance claim. And what I will tell you as somebody, and Justin the same way, as somebody who defended doctors, clinics, and hospitals kind of in the first part of my career, doctors are incredibly reluctant to get involved in litigation. And I would be too if I were a doctor. I understand why. So it's hard proof to get. I've had a couple cases, and I know Justin's had at least one where that was a claim that was made and it was a claim that was paid. But it has to be pretty extreme. It can't just be, I missed my daughter's dance recital because I was so frustrated, or this kept me up a couple nights. It has to be pretty significant. But if you do have those issues and a doctor will relate those to the problems you were having with the insurance company, that's absolutely compensable.
All right. What is our next question?
Our next question also comes from our case files. Contact 6 gets many complaints about home contractors. In some cases, the customer has run into problems with their project and learned their contractor was uninsured. They say the contractor either lied about being insured, provided misleading documentation, or the homeowner never asked about their insurance. Can you tell us what kind of insurance should a hired contractor have?
I think this is good basic information for all of us to have. What kind of insurance should they have? Do they have to have insurance?
Well, no, they don't, is the short answer. And just like a mechanic, a dentist, or anyone, you should be able to trust your contractor. And if you don't know your contractor, trust but verify. So they should have what's called a commercial general liability policy. And that is going to cover their negligent work. And what you need to do is, some contractors have gotten very good at creating sham called certificates of insurance. So anytime somebody comes on a project where they're going to be doing something on your home, they may give you what's called a certificate of insurance saying, this is the insurance company, this is the date the policy is in effect, here are the limits. What I tell people is call the agent. Call the agent that's on there. Make sure that policy is in effect. Make sure it's still a good policy. But what I would say is, even though your contractor may have commercial general liability insurance, it will not cover their defective work. So here's an example. Let's go for the roof example, since you and I like talking about roofs so much. If a contractor comes up and totally butchers your roof and it leaks like crazy, their insurance policy will not cover the cost to replace that defective roof or that defective product. What the insurance company will provide coverage for is if that water leaks from the roof and damages a carpet or damages your floor or damages a TV, they will cover that ensuing loss or that ensuing damage, but it will not cover the defective work. And what I can tell you is, typically on these defective construction claims, the biggest item, the costliest item is their defective work, which will likely not be covered by an insurance policy. Now, if you're dealing with a huge contractor, you're probably not going to have problems. If you're dealing with Joe Sixpack from how many years ago with John McCain, who rides around in his truck, you may have a problem collecting on that.
Right. We've heard about people who were misled. They said they had insurance. When we looked into it when it mattered, we found out they didn't. And are those people out of luck?
those people are not necessarily out of luck, but you're going to be suing somebody who probably couldn't afford insurance, right? And probably they don't have any assets to get. And that's the problem. You may have a great claim against somebody for misrepresentation, for negligent work, but if they're not collectible, you're never getting a nickel. And what people don't understand until it's too late is the state of Wisconsin, like most states, will not allow you to basically sue somebody into poverty. And so there's a lot of ways for these contractors and anybody to protect their assets and put money where they need to so you can never get it. So, yeah, you may be stuck.
Right. So you should definitely ask, and maybe ask for documentation if this isn't someone you've used before.
Well, ask for the documentation and confirm it with the agent. The agent is going to be stated on that certificate of insurance. Call the agent, make sure it's still a good policy, because it may not be.
Got it.
And just briefly, along the lines of everything Ryan said, with your contractor, verify that they have insurance. But like Ryan said, that's not going to cover their defective work. And so it's not enough for your contractor to have insurance for you to be covered in the event that something bad happens during the job. And so you need to make sure your contractor is reputable too and is collectible in the event that they do something wrong, because just because they are insured, that does not mean that any liabilities or anything they do wrong will be paid for by their insurance company.
All right, that's good to know.
And remember the old adage, you get what you pay for.
Yes.
So.
True, very true. All right, our next question, I believe, is on behalf of Robert.
It is, and Robert lives in Milwaukee. Robert wrote Contact 6 about being dropped from his homeowner's insurance policy. He said he filed 2 insurance claims, but neither were his fault. He argued the second claim was negligently and erroneously investigated by the insurance company's adjuster. The question on Robert's behalf: how can I get my homeowner's insurance reinstated?
I'm interested in whether you're hearing about this happening more often with people being dropped from their homeowner's insurance. This was kind of timely with what was going on in California with the wildfires, people who had been dropped from their homeowners' policies. Can they get it reinstated?
I would need to know more, but here's the general gist. An insurance company cannot renew your policy for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. So these policies typically run 6 months to a year. After that 6 months or a year is up, they can non-renew you. They don't have to give you a reason, and there's no problem with that. The legislature is perfectly fine with that. There's an insurance company up in Appleton, Secura, that I think this year or next year they're getting out of personal lines completely. My mother isn't insured to them. My brother isn't insured to them. So I just got this question from my family, and I said they're pulling out of the market, perfectly fine, kind of piggybacking off of what Justin said. They're allowed to do that. What they're not allowed to do, or may not be allowed to do, is what's called a midterm cancellation, where they issue you a policy that's supposed to go, let's say, from January 25 to January 26. June of 25, they cancel you, and they give you a reason. There is a whole body of law, there's a whole body of case law and statutes that prevent insurance companies from doing that unless it's pretty extraordinary circumstances, like you lied to us in the application, although even there, they may not be able to drop you. So if you have a midterm cancellation, there may be something you could do about it. If they just fail to renew for whatever reason, you're out of luck. They're allowed to do that.
Is this why people are hesitant to sometimes file these claims, because they don't want to lose the insurance?
I hear from my clients all the time that, well, if I file this, are they going to drop me? And I'm going to tell you what I tell them. I did insurance defense for 15 years, met with underwriters who are the ones who decide whether the insurance company wants to take this risk. Nobody knows why an insurance company drops you or doesn't drop you. I've had large losses that involved large settlements from an insurance company. They didn't get dropped. I've had clients that got dropped before they even filed suit. So the underwriters know why, and maybe they don't know why, but I've never seen in my career a direct correlation between claims and getting dropped. I think it has to do with a lot of other factors. And what I would tell people is that are concerned about that is, if your insurance company is going to drop you after 1 or 2 claims, you probably don't want that insurance company, and it is a pretty robust marketplace. I mean, there are big players, but there's a lot of players too. When he and I did insurance defense, we represented the very, very largest and some of the very, very smallest. Mm-hmm. You have options.
All right, interesting. We have a handful of questions left. Annette, who do we have now?
Next, we have Brenda's question, and she's from Milwaukee. Brenda didn't offer any details about her situation, but is dealing with a denied dental claim. The question on her behalf, how do I reverse a denied dental claim?
So, Justin, are dental claims kind of their own beast or similar to others?
So they similar to the health insurance, at least if you're, and it's so silly that this is the fundamental question, but if your dental insurance comes through your employer, it is an entirely different story than if you have dental insurance that's private through the marketplace. If you have private dental insurance through the marketplace, we can bring a breach of contract and a bad faith claim against your dental insurer if they're not paying your claim fairly. One of the things that we normally do, I have a couple of dental cases in my office right now, is we reach out to the dentist. And normally they're the best advocate for their client, and they will write us documentation that satisfies the criteria in the insurance policy so that their care can get covered. And that's kind of the way we usually will go about it, is getting something in writing from your dentist themselves saying that the exclusion or whatever plan language is being relied upon to deny your claim doesn't apply, or is being misread, or this isn't the right situation, or something like that. I think is the fundamental first step there, assuming it's not an employer policy, or even if it is, it's not bad evidence to have.
Is it typical that with a dental claim, there's just a cap of the amount you get to spend, and then when you go above that, it's out of pocket? Is that pretty normal?
So not that I've seen, no. I think
Okay.
it's more like health insurance, where you actually you have to pay up to a certain point, and then after that, things are covered. I have actually a fairly significant, like a woman had a $60,000 dental surgery, and we're talking about whether that was medically necessary and that sort of thing under their dental policy, and they work very similar to health policies and to frankly most other insurance type policies. There's kind of a rubric, no matter they all start to look the same after a while, maybe is the best way to put it, whether it's dental, whether it's health, whether it's travel. They have a lot of the same conditions, they function a lot of the same way. We try to identify some differences here, but if you're paying somebody premium money and they are not doing what they promised you afterwards, it kind of generally falls within our insurance practices.
All right, thanks for explaining that. What do we have next, Annette?
Yeah, so this is our last one. It comes from our case files. In December, Contact 6 heard from a Milwaukee Uber driver who'd been carjacked. He said Uber's insurance only paid for some of the damage to his vehicle. The driver also had gap insurance, but said his claim was denied because his car was used for commercial purposes. The question is, gap coverage worthless if I do rideshare?
So, Ryan, we did a story about gap coverage a few years ago, so I understand what it is, but could you start by telling us what gap coverage is?
Well, it's to fill in the gaps.
Yes, the gap between...
The gap between the insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, so rideshare, just like Airbnb, is a totally different beast. I'm not... The gap coverage may not be the question. You need a special lines insurance policy if you're going to do Uber, if you're going to have an Airbnb, any of these things. So your policy, I drove here today, if I'd go decide I'm going to go do Uber and I've got my regular policy and I get in an accident, there's not going to be coverage for that because I'm using my vehicle for a commercial reason. And every auto policy will exclude that. There are specialty lines for Uber drivers. I don't know how many companies do it, but it's more than one. Similar to Airbnb. So I've got an Airbnb cabin, and the insurance is 3 times the cost if I was just using that cabin as a home, but it covers everything, and it's a specialty lines insurance. So for those doing Uber, doing Airbnb, anything like that, chances are your regular homeowners or personal policy will provide no coverage for that, and you need a specialty policy.
So if you start doing this midway through the year, do you have to wait till the end of the year to get new insurance, or is that a life change where you could get a new insurance?
Yeah, no. You're going to need new insurance.
Got it.
Before you start doing the Uber, before you do the Airbnb, you need to get a specialty lines insurance policy. No different than if you own an apartment or something like that you rent out. You can't get a regular homeowner's policy. You need to get a specialty lines insurance. And the reason for that is there's a lot more risk with Uber. And so they're signing up for a bigger risk. There's a lot more risk with Airbnbs. You're having strangers come in. They could start a fire. They could destroy the place. So they want to get those extra premium dollars in. And I've heard from at least 5-6 people who've run into the same problem, and I tell them the same thing. You need to get a specialty lines insurance policy because there is something called a commercial exclusion in your personal policy that if you're doing anything commercial, they're not going to cover it. And there's good reasons for that. So you gotta figure out who the specialty lines are and shop around.
Yeah, I'm happy to share we have an update on this case as well. Annette, was this one resolved?
It was. I heard yesterday that the insurance company did pay his claim.
We reached out on their behalf.
Yes.
And it was like something more than $20,000.
Yep. Just over, $22,500.
So good news for this person.
That's fantastic, but I would say if you want to do Uber, you want to do Airbnb, you need a special policy because I don't know what this person's policy said, but again, I've ran into this situation a number of times, and it's a very, very easy answer.
And
All right.
And the one point that I'd make is it sounds like they said that Uber might have some insurance for this sort of thing. I'd caution people to rely on some other third parties' insurance for you. You won't be able to use it. You're not a policy, unless you have a declarations page, unless you're on the insurance policy, you're going to have to trust that Uber's going to go and do that for you. If it's not your policy, you're not going to have a ton of rights. And so I wouldn't, if I were an Uber driver, I wouldn't rely on any representations by Uber that we have some coverage that might apply to you. If it's not yours, you're not going to be able to sue anybody if they don't do what they say they're going to.
And same thing with the Airbnbs. I know VRBO, Airbnb, they have insurance. I'm not even sure it's insurance. I think it's just them collecting something from you and then maybe paying out later. Do not rely on that. Pay the extra money. It stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, paying 3 times what you otherwise would, but you need to be protected.
Well, that was all really interesting. Thank you for talking about these questions with us
Thank
today.
you.
That concludes
Yeah.
all of our questions. I'm glad we had such a variety. It was interesting. That is all the time we have for today. If you would like to submit a question for a future Ask Contact 6 segment, you can go to fox6now.com and click on the blue Ask Contact 6 button. Thank you to Justin and Ryan for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And thanks also to the people who make this recording possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, Craig Sweeney, graphics, chief photojournalist, Cale Zimney, and our editor, Dave Machuda. I'm Jenna Sachs. Thanks for joining us.